Happy Earth Day, dear Astro friends. It's Melanie on the 22nd of April 2026 with the Astro Weather going until the 28th of April. Not only are we in the first week of Taurus 2026, which started in the evening of the 19th, but also in a very exciting week that wraps up the supercharged month of April. Yes. And what's coming up this week? Most of you know, not only Venus will enter Gemini tomorrow evening after passing Uranus, just 2 weeks later, 2 hours later, but Uranus itself will enter Gemini fully this time on April 25th and will be in Gemini until May 22nd, 2033. Yes, Uranus is 7 years in a sign, has an 84-year cycle, and has not been in Gemini fully, so to say, since the 1940s. But last year, Uranus was in Gemini for a trial phase from July 7th until November 11th. No, November 7th. Sorry. So July 7th until November 7th, exactly 4 months, is when Uranus was first in Gemini last year. So you might already have a sense of those effects in your life, especially if you have anything in very early Gemini or Virgo or Sag or Pisces, because then you would have received, so to say, from Uranus either conjunction, a square, or an opposition. So definitely being triggered in these factors, in these archetypes of yours. And yet, on the other hand, Uranus by nature is unpredictable, so will bring yet new surprise effects this time around. What am I talking about? What are the effects of Uranus in Gemini? Maybe also let's do a little review of Uranus in Taurus just to see the continuum and hindsight. So I have dug out the chart of when Uranus first entered Taurus, which was also in 2 phases, 2018, 2019. So it initially entered Taurus on May 15th, 2018. So also in Taurus season and just after the Taurus new moon. Quite a strong marker. So here is that chart from 2018. And as you see, right, so here is Sun and Moon. The Moon just passed the Sun, new Moon, and Uranus had been at the time just freshly in Taurus. So since then, this whole Uranus in Taurus phase has rolled out, and of course, COVID was a big part of that, right? So all these COVID crisis years from 2019 until 2022, then of course also Ukraine war, then Gaza. So what do these factors have to do with Uranus in Taurus? And let's break it down a little bit, right? And Taurus rules the earth, rules the body, rules nature, rules anything natural, biological, right? So it's unmodified, so to say, organic, right? While Uranus is a disrupting energy. It rules Aquarius, and Uranus is the worst in the traditional rating system, so to say, worst positioned in Taurus, or the most devastating, basically, because it really disrupts all of that. And we've seen a lot regarding all this neo-colonial warfare that also currently is on still, even in the last weeks of Uranus in Taurus. We had new iterations of that with the Iran war spreading out into the Middle East. So it's all about oil, it's all about territory. It is actually quite simple when it comes down to it. And colonization can happen in so many ways, neo-colonization, and even physically, even to our senses, right? So our senses have been very much colonized by technology. Just think of all the big breakthroughs of the digital world, right? So digital disruption of the natural world being a huge factor that we've seen during the Uranus in Taurus years, along with actual territory and the land, along with explosion of real estate prices, unaffordable, right, for regular people. And Uranus being also the ruler of Aquarius, and Aquarius is where Pluto entered in the meantime. Also, by the way, where Saturn and Neptune were conjunct in 2020, starting a whole new 20-year cycle between themselves. And these 20-year Saturn, um, what did I say? Saturn, Jupiter. Did I say Saturn, Neptune? Sorry, that was the recent one. Anyway, we had on winter solstice 2020, we had to correct that again, the Saturn Jupiter conjunction, or Jupiter Saturn, Jupiter's faster conjunction on the first degree of Aquarius, which is also what Pluto entered in 2024. But the Saturn Jupiter conjunction happens every 20 years, as I said. And by the way, the previous one was in May 2000 in Taurus. So that also at the time set the tone for the socio-political and economic, cultural cycle that Uranus entered Taurus in 2018, right? So just the very end of. So a lot about economy, Taurus, right? Again, Taurus, the monetary system, economy, and also the whole question around the land and bodies, colonization, all of this, and also stability, right? Taurus likes stability, while Uranus is pretty destabilizing, and we've seen a lot of that. So I don't need to make a case for that, I guess, right? So now we're coming out of the Uranus in Taurus phase this time, and Uranus enters Gemini. Per se, Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius, is much better positioned in Gemini than it was in Taurus, but that doesn't mean it's all smooth sailing, because Uranus itself is always disruptive, but also it's liberating. It's a revolution, right? So revolution and freedom have been big factors, right? Just again to reference back, have been big factors that people have become aware of with all these elements, with all these scenarios that I described before when it comes to Taurus, right? And now freedom, revolution, liberation is kicking in when it comes to Gemini. And sometimes there is a promise of freedom and liberation, while it might be just an engineered, right, Uranus, an engineered intervention, right, that is not authentic, genuine freedom, right, which is what Uranus wants to take us to. Uranus wants to take us to freedom what? Freedom from shackles, freedom from slavery, freedom from, in terms of Gemini, ignorance, right? And for knowledge, for understanding, for freedom of thought and speech, right? All of that is very apropos Gemini, and also branching out. Gemini is about branching out and diversifying, and from the there's a freedom in that, right? When you have alternatives, in other words, right? When you have freedom to bring also two worlds together, right? Gemini is about the alchemizing of dualities and polarities, yet also the polarization and division, and that can be sort of a starting point. And here's a prime example, of course, United States, because United States from 1776. I have the chart here of the Declaration of Independence, has itself Uranus in Gemini. So here's a chart with a few markers, a bit of older chart I pulled out, but what matters is here Uranus in Gemini, right? So US will have its Uranus return. Not immediately, but it's on the horizon, right? So their Uranus is about 9 degrees, and that's a third into Gemini. The Uranus is 7 years in a cycle, so it's about 2.5 years. We will see that Uranus return for the US. What does that mean? Well, Uranus is the planet of revolution. So, and freedom of speech is the First Amendment, right? So, very apropos US Constitution. And interestingly, for the US chart, the United States have their moon in Aquarius, right? So it's again the connection between a Uranus, rule of Aquarius, and the moon. So it's also we the people, right? And Pluto has entered Aquarius. The US is out of its Pluto return. I would argue, some people say it's still happening, but I would say the Pluto return of the US is intrinsically linked with the fact that their Pluto is in Capricorn, right? And that phased out in 2024. While now the US is approaching its Uranus return, but also had its Chiron return in the meantime, which is a whole other thing, right? So Chiron in Aries, this is the wound of ongoing wars, right? The wounded warriors, the veterans, the the War of Independence, the civil wars, and all that. So now we're seeing with the U.S. Chiron return that this causes just more and more wounds and isolating U.S. as well, which is also Aries. Um, yeah, and it needs healing, right? So, and then the U.S. also had last year, by the way, its Jupiter return in Cancer. Jupiter is now moving over the US, has moved over the US Sun, and Mercury now coming to Mercury retrograde. So hopefully, the people, again, Cancer, right, ruled by the moon, the people will understand what this what really brings not just heroes home, so to say, right, but actually brings people together in the greater human family, right? That is really rather than the greater U.S. or something, right? That I hope for, and the U.S. will have basically just um, before their 250th anniversary on July 4th. They will have a lot of Jupiter transits in Cancer, so it will enter Leo end of June. Jupiter will. So, and then yeah, so U.S. as I said in this context of Uranus will have its Uranus return. So what's in about 2.5 years? And of course, what's also relevant for the U.S. Lastly is that the current president is a Gemini Sun, 14th of June, 1946, and was born under a lunar eclipse with the Sun and Moon in opposite, the Moon South Node in Sag, the North Node in Gemini with Uranus. So he was born with Sun Uranus conjunct, right? So he's definitely a catalyst for this Uranus piece. And Uranus is also cathartic. So it's not necessarily right, right? That would be the sad side, but educational, right? So we can learn so much. We can learn so much, and it's mind blowing, which is Uranus in Gemini, about what's going on via the actions and utterings of the current president. So that's a little example with the US. Then with Canada, since we're with countries, Canada has Venus in Gemini, Moon end of Gemini, but that's not really affected so much by its Uranus. by Uranus entering Gemini. Rather, it will affect it will square the Canadian Mars in early Virgo, and also the Canadian Jupiter retrograde in Pisces in its 12th house early on. What's that got to do? So with how could that play out? Uh, the um, the Uranus in Gemini is a lot about revolution of through knowledge, through conversations, through debates, through um, questions, asking radical questions, and that can have to do also with the whole background, which is the 12th house, right, of Canada. So where does Canada come from in many regards, right? So the current colonial Canada is still being an expression and outpost of the UK and its monarchy. And then we have also that's the Jupiter, right? Jupiter has to do with the king, which has to do with the importance also of even on energetic subtle levels, but yet very influential levels, which would be Pisces, right? 12th house, Jupiter rules Pisces, very Piscean south node, right? What's going on here in the whole energy field of the US? And that what's the daily life reality of the working people, right? This is also Mars in Virgo. And Virgo, again, also ruled by Mercury, just like Gemini. So this is about being analytical, being critical, looking at issues, and all of this is also now up with the nodal reversal for Canada. So currently the North Node is in Pisces, the South Node in Virgo until end of August. And we can look at those dynamics in terms of what's the problem, but even more so, what's the solution, right? So I've been a little abstract here with Canada. I think you can fill in the blanks in your own understanding. And let's go back to Uranus in Gemini, and let's go finally and towards the end also go to this week in general. So Uranus in Gemini, what stands out for it? As I said, it was already on last year, and for a little trial phase, now full on. And Uranus is about revolution, is about game-changing paradigms, and Gemini is also an alchemist. So that's why I also might call again the motto of Uranus in Gemini, like last year, still a big deal, revolutionary alchemy. So alchemizing dualities, which could be science and spirituality, for example, right? Or yin and yang, masculine, feminine, this and that. What could divide us, right? It's a Gemini thing. If we go too much into our head, Uranus says, hey, here is a whole new way of seeing this, how it's actually connected, right? And there will be lots of information, lots to learn about this coming in the next years, and also a more free, out of the box thinking is very welcome with Uranus in Gemini. Of course, it will have to do also with revolutions in the fields of information, communication, learning. Of course, that is AI, and Uranus being the ambassador of Pluto in Aquarius, which is ruled by Uranus, right? So the bigger trend of this whole new era that is very digitalized is also activated by Uranus in Gemini. So we ain't seen nothing yet in that whole revolution. At the same time, that's not the only expression of it, right? So we must not outsource. That's my appeal here and my intention not to outsource our intelligence, our innate human intelligence, not let that get disrupted and and cut off, right, Uranus, through technology and our creativity in this case, right? So, mm, and we can use those tools, but still remain free in our mind, in our brain. Let's not let it be colonized and yeah, certain capacities being atrophied AI and colonized. So then what's really cool coming in the summer is this alignment, which I marked here in the chart for Uranus entering Gemini, and that is Uranus comes with Venus at its entry, right? But has already wide or is building up to a wide trine, air trine with Pluto in Aquarius, and also with a sextile, building up a sextile from Uranus to Neptune in Aries, while Neptune itself creates also a sextile to Pluto. So it's a beautiful blue triangle. This is called, in the system that I learned from Switzerland, called talent triangle, right? So there are talents, there's opportunities, and there are um, the out the outlet here, right? The apex of that closed figure is Neptune. Saturn is nearby, but Saturn is moving on, especially towards July when this triangle gets very exact between July 7th, the day when Neptune turns retro, sort of goes out of the alignment, and then the 17th of July is when Uranus and Pluto come into exact trine with each other. So here's a beautiful opportunity right at the onset of Uranus in Gemini, and it has to do with systems, right? So Aquarius, the also the balance within systems, because early Aquarius has a Libra undertone, and early Gemini does too, right? So there is also more opportunity coming in by understanding our own place, for example, in the system, by learning more about systems, by being more empowered, Pluto, and freer through that, right? And then the Neptune in Aries can either really launch and usher in a that new era, right, that we are moving into now, and the new era that is also transcending the the violence and war of Aries, right? Saturn has already done a good job of showing us what more and more war can do, and it's a warning. And yeah, so we don't want more and more of that karma being rolled out on humanity and on the planet. So how can we transcend? How can we let that go? How can we connect again where there have been enemies and yeah, and competition even, right? So it's all a matter, not all, but competition is a big factor for wars. And yeah, so beautiful alignment right at the beginning. And then also pretty cool is that Venus will now, on the 23rd, which is tomorrow, uh, usher out Venus, ruler of Taurus, will be the last planet to connect with Uranus while Uranus is still in Taurus, right? And then Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, will be the first planet to bring in Uranus. Mercury will connect with Uranus on the 17th of of May, when it freshly enters Gemini as well, its own sign, right? So this is it's quite a beautiful window here right now, where we can also bring together the our understanding, maybe a review, right, of these last years of Uranus in Taurus, and how our values, which is Taurus, which is Venus, we have stood in our values basically, right? And coming from a place of love and of self-love, of love of nature, of love of anything natural, and how that prevails beyond Uranus having come through Taurus, and then Mercury in Gemini being sort of the MC initiating, introducing Uranus into Gemini more fully here as we approach Gemini season even. And so much to learn. And let's just also experience ourselves in new and fresh ways. Like you know that probably also when you are in a different environment that has a different mentality, or when you literally are in a different language field, and or you even speak that language, it changes you and it's refreshing. I always find that, right? So then it's also the whole question is, if we can experience ourselves in so many different ways through different words or different concepts, language, environment, who and what is the true self, right? If it has so many facets, and that is always an ongoing and hopefully liberating quest and inquiry. So yes, Uranus in Gemini is one of the transpersonal planets, so it can be very well be employed in a spiritual context. In other words, for deep questioning, essential questioning. In other words, inquiry, rather than just being doubtful, question everything, always ask AI, right? Stuff like that. And so much more fun and more truly liberating. And so again, the whole notion of Uranus, freedom from, freedom for, but also freedom as such, that is beyond what Krishnamurti said, which is very apropos Gemini then, right? So a freedom that is beyond opposites, that doesn't even have a freedom from or freedom for, otherwise it's not really freedom, right? And so then let's look at this week. And of course, I will also write about Uranus in Gemini. Haven't published that yet, so it's in the making, and you can find it on my blog. And then, of course, also next Astro News newsletter that comes by email. If you have subscribed or would like to subscribe, shoot me a message. Contacts below in the description of the video, and also. Uranus in Gemini. Yeah. Also my Facebook page, of course, right? Then let's look at this week. So as I said, Venus is the first star. Venus is currently also evening star because, see, the sun, this is the chart of Uranus going into Gemini. Once the sun sets, right, Venus is still up with Uranus in the evening sky, so she will be further and further away from the sun. We'll see her more and more because she's faster, right, than the sun at this point. So we'll see her more and more as the evening star before she goes retrograde, which will be this fall. So Venus will be the first planet, besides Uranus, 2 days later, that enters Gemini this year on the 23rd, tomorrow evening. And so we have now this Venus-Uranus conjunction, which happens once a year, but typically not super rare, super rare for it to be at on a cusp when both planets, especially the fast, slow-moving Uranus, enters a whole new sign, right? So it's a very exciting and hopefully also enlightening week, and hopefully the surprises from Uranus have been joyful, and yeah, so that could be also some, I know, situations where you had to be innovative. I'm just reminded that I had a few situations with art pieces, literally at Venus in my sphere here, that either popped out from the background because I was looking for it and found something that I really liked. Like, hey, what is that? And then two also had little accidents, so I had to be innovative to fix them, and it worked as it looks like. Then yes, as I said, Uranus entering Gemini on the 25th, a big deal. And then we have also this week, actually on the day, on the 25th, we have also the square from the Sun in Taurus, early Taurus, to Pluto in Aquarius, again ruled by Uranus. So that one is also a big deal because that square comes twice a year only, and so we're having some charge, some possible conflict, right? So what does the Sun and Pluto have to do with each other? And in contrast to each other, the Sun is light, Pluto is shadow. So and this is also now joy in terms of nature and the Taurus side, right? Versus again Aquarius, the system, the technology, the bigger changes. So there could be some, you could feel the contrast and even the some stress around it, right? Because a side of you really wants to be in nature and just wants to enjoy spring, while at the same time all these changes happen in the system. So how can you reconcile it? A beautiful way of basically catering to both is using the Pluto in Aquarius also in a way of what I'll be doing with friends on Friday is basically to get together in circle, in community, in nature. So perfect, right? And also more nature time with a friend on Saturday. Nice. And so let's look at the week otherwise. So we're now in the first week of Taurus, which is April 19th. April 20th is actually was the first full day of Taurus until the 30th. And that is the first decade that has a Capricorn undertone. If you're not familiar with my decanate system, so the gist here is in this application that the first 10 degrees of each sign in the zodiac have the undertone of the cardinal sign of that element. Cardinal, earth, right, is Capricorn. And then the central part of each element have an undertone of the fixed sign of that element. In other words, when you have central Taurus, like the middle, the central 10 degrees, it also has a Taurus undertone, which goes beautifully with the whole Beltane energy. And the next full moon on the 1st of May, literally on Beltane, and also Wesak moon of the Buddha will be also in central Scorpio Taurus. And the last 10 degrees of each element have an undertone of the mutable sign of that element. So last 10 degrees of Taurus will have an undertone of Virgo because Virgo is mutable earth. And then let's look at the moon here. The moon has been since yesterday, the 21st, in Cancer, is today in Cancer, and this afternoon, just as I'm recording, how sweet, the or just before, the moon has been conjunct Jupiter, which happens once a month, and now, as long as Jupiter is in Cancer, the alignment will be in Cancer. So in April still, in May and in June, two more times in Cancer. And that's sweet because the moon rules Cancer and Jupiter is super strong, right? So we probably really feel it, especially today. It's been a really sweet, beautiful day about anything relating to home, family, belonging, the house. And yeah, it's been a real, really sweet and happy day in that regard. Improvements as well. Here we go, and hopefully we see them in the evening, in the night sky, right? Because where would they be? Let's just check it out here with the chart. As wait a minute, I have the one from 2018. This is the current one. Jupiter, right? When the sun is about to set in the west. Right? Jupiter is high up. So Jupiter will be when the moon, in this case with Uranus, the moon has passed Jupiter, right? So, but in the evening, Jupiter is high up, right? So Jupiter will be setting towards the west when uh, the sun when the sun has set, right? So we can see them basically in the night sky, but towards the west together, Jupiter moon, right? Keep an eye on it. And then, so Jupiter moon together this afternoon, tonight. The moon will enter Leo tomorrow just after noon, 12:41 p.m. Will be in Leo until Saturday after Saturday evening after 6:04 p.m., which is what will be a half moon, right? So there's Leo and Taurus, which is kind of can be a tension, and so don't be too much attached to your ego or stubborn and resisting others, and all this can come up. But at the same time, it's a passionate energy, and it can bring lots of joy and fun. And so be playful, Leo moon, and enjoy life, right? So um, then the moon will enter Virgo, and we have an even more earthy energy with the sun in Taurus, moon in Virgo. Nice. From Saturday evening on, all day Sunday, all day Monday, until Tuesday early morning. So this is great to yeah, it's a waxing moon. So it's great to actually literally to do garden work and to be in nature and see the wellness, the benefits of for our wellness, for our well-being in that. Yeah, and then we have the moon entering Libra. So we have a double Venus ruled sun in Taurus and Venus ruled moon in Libra on the 28th and 29th until the 30th in the after in just after noon when she enters Scorpio, which will be already a gibbous moon before the full moon, right? So this is a really strong Libra waxing moon, which brings us again to the themes of fairness, of relatedness, dynamics with one another, needs in that regard, that we need people. I really feel the need for partnership and relationship and for peace, of course, and for calm on the Taurus side, right? So hopefully there'll be really deep changes with that Scorpio moon, the flower moon, and the 1st of May Wesak moon of the Buddha in Scorpio Taurus. Deep changes that, yeah, really transform this situation that we're currently in the world. And of course, all of us can contribute with our consciousness. So that's it for this week's Astro Weather. It's been a big arc, and of course, Uranus in Gemini has been the big main feature. Hope you got a lot out of it, and if you'd like to take it into a personal exploration, come over for a session. I will have a special on for everybody with Gemini, and you can find that on my Facebook page. So, wishing you a great week, a wonderful entry into Uranus in Gemini mini era until 2033. And you can see me again here, of course, next week or live in person. Cheers.